Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 young kids. I'm figuring this out as I go, but I'm here to talk to Bonnie, who has been writing and speaking on the subject for over a decade and has been homeschooling for 3 decades.
My name's Bonnie Landry. I've got 7 kids. They're ages 13 to 33. I've been homeschooling for 29 years. I'm a wife, a mom, a grandma. I'm a speaker and a writer, and I'm an advocate of joy. So we're here to provide this podcast so that homeschooling can look like you imagined it to be. So good evening, ladies.
Hello.
Hi, I'd like to introduce you, Elizabeth, and our listeners to Lauren Power, who is our guest tonight. And we've asked her here as a guest because mainly that I have received many questions in the past and just recently podcast questions about kind of the balance of being a working mom and homeschooling your kids at the same time. And a lot of times this questions actually come from moms who have not yet made the decision to homeschool. You know, I need to work or I would like to work, and you know, how do I make that happen? So a mutual friend of ours, Elizabeth, put Lauren and I together. And Lauren has also recently started a business in support of this same idea, but she was a working homeschooling mom for her homeschooling career. So Lauren, if you could introduce yourself to Elizabeth and everybody else out in there in podcast land.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I'm Lauren, and I call myself a reluctant homeschooler. My husband was really keen to homeschool, and and I didn't like the idea, just to be blunt. I was terrified, like many of us are, you know, that our kids are going to be weird, or that they're not going to get, you know, they're not going to get the education, or they're going to be, you know, they're going to miss out. And it took actually a crisis in our family to bring us to a point of actually listening to Gordon Neufeld talk of the Neufeld Institute, talking about what kids need the most. Mm-hmm. And basically, unbeknownst to him, he wasn't talking about homeschooling, all of the things that
you love,
that I was concerned about. There was no legs left on that stool, and I realized what the kids really needed was not what I thought, and absolutely changed our journey. So anyway, I'm a business owner, actually ran a couple businesses while homeschooling the kids. So I'm now have a kind of shift my target a little bit and really helping homeschool moms, because just recognizing that I didn't realize that it was a thing to have done that. And how many amazing families are stuck in that now, a lot of them not by choice.
Yeah. So sometimes it's a choice, sometimes it's where they have to be, you know, and especially with sort of housing the way it is now and whatnot, you know, it's hard to be on one income. So the mutual friend that we have that put us together knew sort of my own parenting paradigm, and Lauren has the same ideology. And so I thought that would be ideal, because, you know, when the relationship with your family comes first, that changes everything, right?
Oh.
And so, so if you want to, could you speak a little bit to then your philosophy, because people are all used to hearing about our philosophy, kind of where you're at and what matters to you.
Yeah, well, I think that's actually, I kind of started out in my introduction kind of talking a little bit about that journey for us. Basically that day changed the trajectory for me personally, which then of course changed things for my children. The reason that I was so thankful to be invited to that session where he was talking to parents of teenagers, we had toddlers, but I'm also the parent of 2 stepkids, and they were tweens at that time. So they were just about to be teens. So I was kind of listening to what he was talking about from 2 different lenses. But I was there rather desperate, actually, because our 3-year-old daughter, very much, not very long before that session, had started these bouts of crying that I could not figure out. I did not know what was wrong with her, and was really at my wit's end about how to help, and then prayed and, you know, asked everybody I could think of. And when I sat in that session where Gordon Neufeld talks about our kids need us, they need us to be present. And I was like, all the light bulbs went off in my head, and I realized I was the cause of her tears. I was busy and distracted and doing all the good mom things. But I mean, I was at home. I wasn't out working outside the home. But my brain, or my attention, was very scattered. and being able to come back from that session the very next day, changing, you know, really a couple of, not a lot, but a couple of really tangible things about really noticing how present I was being with her specifically. This crying stopped the next day. It was, I mean, you would have thought it was magic, but it wasn't. And then just beginning to work that out. And then of course, at that time, my husband was wanting to homeschool. So all of a sudden, she was 3. So we had a couple more years to start learning about what kids need the most. And I couldn't with a conscience then send them to school, because what they needed was the time to play and the time to be kids, and the ability to keep connecting with us in a way that really nourished their souls. And the difference in my daughter particularly, my son was 18 months at the time. The difference was so obviously the right thing and felt so right to my own heart. It just didn't line up with what culture had taught me. And yet once I heard it, I was like, it was just like a big exhale of, now I know what to do. And the difference in the kids, and has continued. Now they're 20 and 21 now. The fruit of those decisions still shows up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean, that's how he touched me, Gordon Neufeld, so strongly. And that whole attachment ideology was, he gave me the tools that really culture has kind of beaten out of us in how to be present with our kids, truly, like not just there, and how to connect with them when connection is compromised. And so it was a pretty life-changing experience for me as well. So we'll put some, we have in other shows as well, but we'll put the links to the Neufeld Institute in our, and some of his works he does that are phenomenal, in the show notes after a talk.
If I may, somebody I went to college with, actually, she has her own podcast and it's called Trending with Timmery. And the other day, I haven't listened to this episode, but the quote from it says that that Generation Z and millennials are the unaffirmed generation. They don't have, that, I think, attention from their parents, and that's leading to all these like identity crises and these, the identity in politics and stuff. And I saw that, and it just really kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was like a blow to my stomach. Just this, I'm so grateful my kids are being homeschooled, because hopefully I can continue to work on making them feel affirmed. Yeah. And so it just kind of seemed to parallel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that we are culturally, we're at a real turning point. And I think that he and others, his work is undoubtedly, the cause of this, right? And we first started getting into his stuff, probably around the same time you did, 20, 25 years ago kind of thing. And you could recognize that some of the things he said were so recognizable that, okay, here's the problem, not just with my family, but with the culture, right? Yes. So can you tell us a little bit about your family, how old your kids are, and what your homeschool experience was kind of like once you started into it?
We were going to homeschool 1 year at a time. Like we were going to homeschool until they were 8, because developmentally that was like a really important phase, where the mixed feelings began. And listening to Dr. Neufeld talk gave me that awareness of, even if we could make it a couple of years, the difference in their academics. What's that?
If we can just hang on until
I know, if we can just do that. So that's kind of where I started. But of course, once I started learning, I mean, I never wanted to teach kids. I never had any desire, no skill set in that area. So it was definitely, way over my comfort zone. But once we got started and started learning about it, I was like, oh, I don't need to be an expert teacher. I'm already an expert on my kids.
Yeah. And
we got the help from the teachers in our, the program that we signed up for. So those were big paradigm shifts for me. Yeah. So we had 2, 18 months apart. So in school, just a year apart. And my daughter was the older. My son is a year younger. So they're now 21 and 20 and don't live in my house anymore.
Isn't that weird?
It's very weird. It's glorious. But I can imagine it would be not glorious if they weren't in such a great space themselves, emotionally, that they are grown-ups, and all of the work we've done is really showing. And then, so the 2 of them were part of that journey. So you asked me about like how the homeschooling went.
Mm-hmm. Clearly,
Yeah.
went past 8.
Say that again.
Clearly, you went past the age of 8.
Yes, we did, because it was going so well. So yeah, it actually became really apparent that they loved it, and they would watch the neighbors, you know, across the road go to school, and they were just like, they actually didn't want to. We were actually able to be involved with a community where they could go and have, you know, some time together, which was a really important part for me, because I was like, at some point, we're probably not going to homeschool. This was in my mind. Right. So I wanted them to be able to have, you know, some connection, so that it wouldn't be so weird at some point. So homeschooling itself really showed me how much our academic system is designed as childcare. Right. And what kids need the most, you know, there's some blocks that they need to learn. And how countries like, you know, there's countries like Sweden and these who don't do much academics until age 8 anyway. So those first couple years, we can relax a lot. And I'm a driven performer type person. I love getting things done. And so translating that to homeschooling isn't good, because kids don't need that. They need a little bit of time, they need a lot of repetition over time. Yeah. So I felt homeschooling was as much about my growing up, my own development, as it was, you know, the kids. And we were really on a journey together. So for us, we did fairly structured homeschooling because I worked. We started at 8, we went for a walk. We designed our day with a schedule, simply because I had a schedule. And so unlike a lot of their homeschool friends, we were up and had breakfast and started school at 8. Yeah. Like that neighbor left at 7:30 in the morning to go to school. So it wasn't that weird from their paradigm. But yeah, we kind of ran things like that.
Well, and you have the freedom to do that as a homeschooler, right? You know, I mean, however you do it. You know, sometimes we get questions from people, you know, well, I just had a question recently, well, I use workbooks, you know, is that okay? And I said, well, absolutely, that's okay. What matters is the relationship that you have with them. And if you decide you want it to be fully workbook your whole time, you know, your whole time homeschooling, you know, that's okay, right? However, you run a homeschool from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's too when your husband's home, right? Yes. You have so much freedom. And, you know, freedom to structure, freedom to be unstructured, right? It's just okay, right?
Every year I felt like it changed.
Yeah.
Every 3 months, actually, everything was on the table. What's working? What do we need to adjust? My schedule at work, volunteer time, stuff at church. How is it working? That was a regular, I was willing to let anything go, because the priority was our kids. And so we would often fine tune, and it became really obvious at some point I needed to hire someone. Yeah. So that, you know, I was like, it was partly a developmental shift in them. Yeah. And partly, so there's so many little pieces that you can add and adjust as the kids. And so because you're the boss of really their development, with that kind of help and that giving yourself permission to notice, oh, my kids might need something. And for me, that was a huge point of prayer. Like, okay, God, I don't sure what my kids need, but can you help me find what it is? And something would arrive.
Yeah. This was almost our whole podcast last week was on assessing, right? Assessing and being aware, and you know, so this plays well into that. Do you have a question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the biggest challenge is with juggling work and homeschooling. What does that look like?
I would say your own emotional health is the hardest part. I think it is, regardless, I think that's the hardest part. I think planning is the biggest thing. We were weird. My kids kind of often felt like they were the only kids with a working mom. Their homeschool community, you know, those moms didn't. I'm an entrepreneur, born entrepreneur, so there was no way that I would have felt whole if I was home completely. Even if financially it didn't matter. I just love business. So I think the biggest and most important thing was really the planning, having a schedule that worked, and then like I think what I mentioned before, being willing to change it. I think the advantage I had being a business owner was that I was also in charge of that schedule.
Right.
If you're working as an employee, then the requirement would then there's another person in the conversation of, hey, I need to switch my hours. Can I do that? And I
Right.
think a lot of it is we just need to ask for what we need.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling disempowered that, oh, while I'm working, I can't do anything. And I
Kind
think
of like we're a victim of our own life, right?
yes. And we have a lot more say about a lot of stuff
Yeah.
than we realize, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. So planning is kind of, you feel like the thing is that, how am I going to work this out, right? So
Yes.
assessment is probably one of the biggest tools you're employing, right? And yeah, what does it look like? And I think sometimes we can tend to get in a bit of a rut where we're flogging a dead horse, that, okay, this is the way it's supposed to look, we're supposed to do it this way. And, and so therefore, I'm failing, you're failing, everybody's failing, as opposed to thinking, okay, what's not working here? And that's in a relationship too, that's a completely different question than, you are not supposed to be a bad kid, and I'm not supposed to be losing my temper, and we're not supposed to be wasting so much time arguing today, right? Those are the accidents, in a sense, right? The question should be, what's not working here? What is working and what's not working, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'd like you to sort of lay out for homeschool moms what it is you do and how you support homeschoolers and support particularly moms who want or need to be working and homeschooling. What does that look like?
Well, I'm a life and business coach. So that is really sort of the workings out of that. But specifically, I'm drawn to women who are either business women or working moms, right, who have the ability to make changes. So it's really helping moms. Because I think, we get it. We're the ones in our own way. When you ask me the most challenge, the biggest challenge is myself when it comes to homeschooling, right? Because it's my own expectations, my own lack of kindness to myself, my own trying to measure up to some ridiculous, who knows where that comes from? It's just like this societal thing of what we think it should look like. And we're really kind of mimicking a classroom, or we're trying to, we see how another mom does it, and then it doesn't matter whether they're working or not. We think, we get feeling inadequate, which is so much of our own work in this is doing that work of like, wow, okay, I'm feeling really triggered as I'm not adequate. And so spending some time there individually is part of that. So really, under the guise of business coaching, it's really life coaching and helping women work through the obstacles and really practically working out what isn't working. And I think the reality of working with the coach is that, I've worked with coaches myself for so long, that we're able to talk with someone who gets where we're at, who's fully talk about what we just talked about, someone who's fully vested in you, which is what we want to be for our kids. And actually listen through the process of what the issues are, and someone who's already gone through it. So I really just come alongside, moms and walk through, usually individually, but what I'm doing right now is a free boot camp for, boss moms who are homeschooling. Okay. Some of them won't be homeschooling, but really trying to navigate through all that. And it's actually, the next one I'm doing is starting next week, but we really just take 5 days and really give women a bunch of great tools. A lot of them are about self-awareness, but also just practically, how do you figure this out in whatever season you're in? Because it changes all the time. Yeah. And I sort of imagine, just by kind of what you're saying and the life coaching aspect of this, that, even moms who aren't working outside the home or inside the home, or, but beyond, they're having paid employment, they'd probably still benefit, right? Because it's time management, it's tools for self-assessment, tools for, because I always have done things above and beyond my duties as a stay-at-home mom, right? And I've never worked outside the home. I've never worked for paid employment, but, I've written books, and I've, ran groups and done co-op and all that kind of stuff. And I think, okay, that sort of life coaching aspect of this would probably be helpful for most moms, right? Yes. In terms of just making your life more smoothly, Yeah. It's different than, go ahead. Would it be helpful for moms who have some kind of job that outside the home that they can't change hours of, that they, work evenings or they work weekends or whatever? In terms of,
Okay, so how, in direct ways, how would that help them?
Well, I think because the biggest obstacles we have, no matter whether we're in charge of the hours of our employment or not, is still ourselves.
Right.
And so when we say you're in a tighter container in your employment, for instance,
Right.
the reality is how you relate to yourself and your kids, which is 95% of homeschooling in reality. The success of it is really about that.
Yeah.
That we still get in our own way. We beat ourselves up. Our rituals of self-care, like we've grown up, all of us have grown up with mothers. I mean, I haven't met anyone yet. Maybe there are some out there. We've all grown up with mothers who didn't look after themselves especially well. They taught us to be codependent, to look after everybody else, to do all of that stuff. And so that's what we feel is right and normal. Yeah. And so much of the work we need to do is to pause, to learn that it's okay to rest. It's okay to, actually, it's not just okay, it's essential, but there's so much of that stuff that goes on. So I know a lot of my own work has been around that. And I felt like homeschooling was just one of the catalysts for my own growth. Yeah. It just happened for me that I was, my love is for business. So that's what worked for me. But yeah. I really think it doesn't matter what else you're doing besides homeschooling. Homeschooling is it's like adding a whole other layer of, I don't know what, to parenting. Parenting's the hardest thing already. And now you add homeschooling. So you add another layer of work to be done personally. That's beautiful and difficult. And that's, I think, a big part of the joy of this growth period for our whole families as we come out better.
Yeah. You were saying that, that moms who may not be working could benefit from your boot camp. But I'm wondering, because I think about, there are a lot of things that I could better and control, but a lot of it surrounds, like my almost 2-year-old daughter, where I can't control or, put her into this little box to get A, B, or C done because, she's pitching a fit because she's hungry, but she's refusing to eat anything. So would a mom who's
2-year-old
she's being too, doing her work.
Right. So would a mom, say at my stage in life still benefit from your course?
Yeah, I think so, because I think the biggest part of that, just that dynamic you're talking about, like when our kids are toddlers and really young and really, there's no containment. That's, they're, adding some structure and some sanity, but so much of that is self-management, right? My Lord. It really helps. And I think that's, the dance that we're all in at whatever stage, how many kids and what their ages are that we have in this moment is our reality. And so often I listen to it all the time and it breaks my heart, is parents going like, oh my gosh, can't wait till the kids leave, or I can't wait till this, whatever's over. And it's very difficult to be present on lots of different levels. So we spend, just so it's clear, we spend about half of the boot camp sessions, like there's 5 days of training essentially. Mm-hmm. Half of it is for everyone. It's just managing ourselves better. And then
how many hours per day, just so people are aware?
The boot camp itself?
Yeah.
It's just an hour a day, but you don't have to be live. You can listen to the recording. Okay. It's just a container to try to basically get you a lot of stuff fast, and then you can decide what you want to do with it from there. It's very good for everyone.
I think, just speaking to your question, Elizabeth, that this is something that really struck me, like just looking at your website and your work, was that, the relationship with your kids has to come first, right? And I'm talking about efficient homeschooling all the time. Homeschooling can be efficient. You don't have to be, you don't need a lot of clutter, blah, blah, blah. Relationship clutter, I think, is one of the ways that it just takes so much time when you get into endless cycles with our kids, where if attachment and our relationship with them becomes the first point of contact, we eliminate a lot of the problems that become just eternal daily problems, right? That doesn't mean she isn't going to come up every day with some new, thing she flips out about 5 times a day, but that it's, it spins out really quickly because of how we manage that, right? And so, or if it doesn't spin out quickly, we just learn to be okay with it, right? Like I'm just going to be with you, who you are, in what you are right now. The same way I can learn how to be with myself in that way when I'm sad or mad or, frazzled or whatever, right? And so it becomes kind of a point of efficiency, really. You know, I mean, I hate to cut it into sort of, that seems like heartless terms, but really,
Beautiful.
yeah, it is.
Beautiful way to say that. That's exactly it. Is you end up not doing so much damage and wasting so much energy for everyone and actually spiraling. Yeah. So everything is, it's like everything gets tighter.
Yeah.
And more beautiful. It's like, how can it help everything? It seems like, how could this simple change change your life, change your relationship with yourself, with God, with your spouse, with your kids, with your homeschooling, with the result? Like it absolutely is paradox.
Absolutely.
Paradigm everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always call it the win-win-win-win, because we win because we learn to be more virtuous. The child wins because they get a mom whose first goal is to be in relationship with them, you know, in a healthy relationship with them. You know, of course, that affects our relationship with God, but also in the culture, right? The culture is seeing something that calls them to a higher bar, and they want it, right? They want it. Whatever that is going on in there, that's what I want, you know? And so, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's an incredible thing. So yeah, so I would encourage people to have a look at your boot camp. That would be fantastic. Is there a charge for the boot camp?
It's a 5-day.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was one of those things as I was, you know, kind of praying about like, how can I make things more accessible right now? This was kind of the idea that's popped. So there may be another one coming as well, but if, you know, depending on the timing of people listening to this, but yeah.
Yeah, this comes out on Monday. So if it's, you have one, how often do you have them?
It's, well, about once a month, but the Monday one, it won't be too late to jump in on Monday if they want to jump in right away. If someone's like really hungry, you know.
Elizabeth, did you want to bring up those questions that were the ones that were specifically submitted by parents?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah. One of the questions is, what are your best tips for parents who want or need to work while they homeschool their kids?
Yeah, I just think that being kind to yourself is a big part of that, and doing your best to be present. Whatever time you have, here's something that I think really helped me, and it may help you. The best tip is, a lot can happen in 10 minutes. And one of the biggest things that I did after listening to Gordon, who found my daughter was 3, my son was 18 months, was to take 10 minutes and be present with my daughter. 10 minutes, everything would calm. I would calm as well. But she would go play, she would continue on. And just doing that 2 or 3 times a day. And actually, if your kids are a little older, doesn't matter. Around 10 minutes of you being totally focused, no phone, no thinking about what else you have to do, just, you know, listening. I also recommend, I just touch on this lightly in the boot camp, is looking at the 5lovelanguages.com. Go to that website, find out what your love language is, and in that 10 minutes, do something effective for each of the kids that works for them. So that's 30 minutes a day on average. So even if you're working long hours, it doesn't take long to spend 30 minutes a day with each of your kids, and everything in your house will go from zingy. It'll start to settle, and you'll start finding better connections. And I would start there, as a homeschool mom.
Yeah,
and everything.
And a great expression. A lot can happen in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
One of the expressions that that I find is a mantra is don't make it worse. Whatever you do, don't make it worse. You know, so whatever's going on, like, you know, you spill a jug of juice on the floor, don't make it worse by screaming at anybody.
Right.
Whatever.
Well, that is beautiful.
So those catchphrases are important for us, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. Like, you know, a lot could happen in 10 minutes. That should be a little poster on our fridge, right?
Yeah. Well, I love it because so I have 4 kids, and my youngest son is 4, and I've been noticing, has been really wanting more attention, and he's not been acting out, but he'll you know, sit down and try and write letters, and he's just making X's and lines and stuff, but he'll keep bringing me these like little things of art, you know, and like, this is for you. And then he'll stand there and like, can you read it? And I said, no, what does it say? And then he'll kind of look at it and think for a minute, and then he'll tell me what it says. But yesterday I had millions of things to do, but he wanted to play a game. And so I sat down and I played a game with him, and it was like, he was just so happy.
Wow. So good, eh? It's so
That's
good.
Such a good example. Yeah.
Because it's this time when your kids are young that it's just so hard to stay aware of that, because you just so many balls in the air, you know?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So looking back, you know, you think, how did I do Elizabeth, honestly, how did I do that? Looking at my own kids who have kids, you know, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a season that you end up swimming in and you just keep going. But yeah, I'm the same. Looking back, I'm like, I don't know how. Yeah. And 4 kids, God bless you. That's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of personalities. Like, it sounds like your son is probably a gifts guy.
Yeah.
Bringing you things. And it, you know, then it amps up when they're needing attention, and it shows up in different ways. My daughter, God bless her, is the complete opposite of me.
Yeah.
Quality time, it was really hard for me to figure out. I had to be a pretty big detective on that one. So me being busy and distracted, you know, mentally busy and unavailable essentially, was like her kryptonite. It was absolutely the worst possible scenario for her, was for me to be busy, you know, distracted. From her love language. My son, not the same. He was, you know, touch. So he'd come and get a hug when he needed one. And so he was fine, but my daughter was melting because of that disconnect.
Yeah. I think one of my sons is the same way. I think quality time is big for him because he just wants to play a game. He loves board games. So that's all he asks all day long. Will you play a game with me?
It's the hardest one. It is the hardest one. Like, oh yes, I understand.
I was so excited when my kids were old enough they could play games together, because I never had to play another board game in my life.
You know, except it doesn't work.
Board games and crafts. And it's like, okay, once you are on your own with that, I'm so
Except that doesn't work when my oldest son does not really like playing games.
Yeah. So, you got a couple more years before there's
yeah, for sure.
A few more questions from parents that I'd like to address. Do you want to bring those up, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you talk about how to avoid comparing homeschooling hours and experiences to those in public schools?
And in this case, other homeschoolers, because you're like different than other homeschoolers too, right?
Right.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I think to realize is that, I think I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is that the school system was developed as childcare. It is not the best way for kids to learn under any circumstances. If we were to start like, okay, developmentally, what do kids need to learn by the time they're 18, you know, to have a full life, be able to go to university or whatever else is on your criteria list, it would not be sitting in a classroom for 12 years. And so I think it's really good to give yourself permission to let go of that. And whatever it takes to let go of that, like if you need to remind yourself or whatever, like just, it's okay. What your kids actually need, they can get in about until they're quite a bit older, you know, grade 6, 7, some of the foundational stuff is starting to get more important, but elementary up to grade 4, you can so relax on the hours. There's not hours that are required. They need to just have some touch points. And that's also giving yourself, and here's the thing, and just to be honest, when my kids were that age, I knew this, and it was still really hard because I hadn't journeyed yet. Now that my kids are 20 and 21, and Bonnie's similar, we can tell you.
Yeah.
It is not necessary. It gets worked out and your kids are going to be fine. So I think that's a big part. You can just let go of those expectations that we put on ourselves. And also, as far as like how other people are doing it, there's so many right ways, and every family and the dynamics are different. And even if it's not the way you want to do it, like say you're like, well, I would way rather have a different job where I had different hours or whatever it is that you feel would fix it for you. It actually isn't going to be that much different, even if you get your sweet spot, because the reality is what your kids need, even if you just have a couple hours a day, is enough.
Yeah.
So I think just let go.
For moms who are in a situation, maybe they're in a group of moms and the moms are talking about, you know, how they homeschool or various other things, and that feeling starts creeping up your back and you start getting stressed. What do you recommend in the moment when you're actually getting that feeling like I'm not adequate or we're not the same or whatever? Yeah.
I think the best thing to do is to ask like, what am I feeling? What is this making me? Like, be aware of the feeling, because it's not always the same. You know, it triggers something in us. I'm not good enough. They're doing a better job. My kids are going to fail. Really get honest about what is coming up for you. What is that? Because until you actually know what is activated when that's happening, you're not able to do much effective work with it. But once you know what it is, I'm a fail, I'm a terrible mother,
Yeah.
My kids are going to die, whatever it is. I mean, it could be that dramatic. Once you know what that is, then you have some ammunition to go at it and actually speak the truth about what it is. Are your kids going to fail? Actually, Bonnie and Lauren just told you no. Actually, you could actually do no school with them for the next 2 years, actually, no matter what age they are, and they'll be fine. They will recover. So you can rest on that, but also then notice, because it's an invitation to notice
to ourselves.
For your own self, what needs to have some truth spoken. And this is actually where the work is for all of us is, I am enough. My kids are going to be fine. I want to just say one other thing is we like to deflect on our kids that they're not going to be okay. And it actually isn't about that at all. What's actually going on when you really dig down is that I'm not okay. Yeah. And so then we like, oh, well, my kids are not gonna be fine. And we think that's the actual story, but I encourage you to dig a little deeper. It's actually that I am what? And once you know
I am feeling a thing. What is the thing?
And I have a feeling chart I love to give people, and actually I could send it to you, you can make it available. And I use that a lot for my own self because I'm a recovering no feeler. I learned young in my family that, you know, there's a few emotions that were okay, but not a lot of them. So I have had to work over the years to get better at figuring out. So having a list in front of you, I kept it on the fridge. I had it on the counter for years with the kids.
That's really helpful for parents.
I use it. Great tool.
Could you also share tips on how to avoid feeling like my kids are receiving less of an education because I'm not at home full time?
Yeah, that is a big one. I felt like that a lot. I think the thing that helped me was that I think I'm enough of a rebel to notice that what the system says kids need is mostly garbage. Not mostly. There's a lot of garbage mixed in. They do a lot of, you know, really smart people know what kids need. But the system, the education system itself and what kids need to say enter college or to like, it's really good to think about what is it you want for your daughter or son? Is it you want them to become a doctor? So they need to have these things like, what's the track that you have in your own mind for your kids? Of course, your kids are going to do what they're going to do, but it's really good to really digest that. What is it that you're really anxious about? What are they going to miss out on? Is it that they're going to go back to school in 2 months and they're going to be behind? Is it that 10 years from now, they're not going to graduate from high school? Is it that they're not going to get a scholarship? Like really break it down when you start really feeling inadequate and say, you maybe look at the homeschool mom or family who's taking their kids on field trips and they have all this fun. And you're like, I can't do that. And so your kids, maybe part of it is that they feel left out and you're like, they have like not as fun an education is sometimes part of this as well. I would recommend that you connect with other families as well. Like we networked a lot. The reality was I couldn't drive my kids everywhere. I worked. So I carpooled up and had families that were able to meet us and take the kids. And I, you know, so we worked out some trades like that. One thing I would recommend is just allow yourself the permission to be creative. So many ways to get your kids what they need. And often it's not like sometimes, like Bonnie said, sometimes it's crafts. And I'm one of those. I'd rather poke myself in the eye than do crafts. My daughter needed crafts.
You do crafts, Elizabeth?
Are you a crafty?
Are you crafty?
Can't wrap my head around it.
No, me too.
I desperately,
because it wouldn't be better to not.
Oh my
I
gosh.
wish I was, I do, but I'm very black and white. It's like, if I don't follow the directions, you know, like word for word and it messes up, then I feel like a failure. So
then you just fail at crafts as well.
Right.
Yeah, no, it adds to that. Oh my gosh. So what we did is hired someone to help us. So I hired, and it was a great tip. I hired grandparents locally who were missing their grandkids and they came and did crafts. And so we didn't have any family in the country we had none of that. So it ended up being a solution that helped in lots of areas. So when you feel like you're failing, think about in what exactly way are you failing? And honestly, there's often a solution for that you may not have thought of until you did the work of getting really specific about what is it that you're failing in.
And write it down too, you know, like if I think so just even brainstorm on a piece of paper, like what are all the feelings that come up for me and when, why, you know, that we can just sort of start to maybe unpack what's going on in us, because we're often very unaware of our feelings. It sounds like your course would be really, really helpful for people like that. Like, what is it that's going on with me?
Yeah, no kidding.
I just want to harken back to something you said at the beginning of this particular question was, I'm enough of a rebel that. And, I think finding our inner rebel is a really good idea, because being, I was just answering somebody's question online. Somebody had sent me a question, and, what do you do when people don't agree with your choice, right? Like your family or whatever don't agree with your choice. And I said, just be really confident in who you are. And if you're not confident, pretend you are, right? And that's reality, that we okay, you know what? I'm just going to hold my head high. I rarely ever got people in my life saying, why do you, are you sure you're doing the right thing with your kids, or that kind of, I just didn't really get that. And I was hearing other people got that kind of thing. And I think it's because I just pretended I was super confident all the time. Like, I might not have been, but I certainly carried myself as though I was. And I think that makes all the difference, right? In how you carry yourself, right?
Yeah, just being okay with the decision you've made.
Yeah.
I also love your idea of hiring out, grandparents in the area. My neighbor is just the best neighbor ever. She just loves my kids. She brings them little gifts, and she actually, was it last summer, brought them over a couple canvases and some paint, and she had them just doing a little painting craft. And
your neighbor needs help.
Craft mom.
Yeah, your neighbor needs help. She needs help.
He really does.
With doing crafts, so that you can, like, you're going to relieve her of this hole in her life that she doesn't get to do crafts with kids.
Yeah.
Right.
We found that too, like people in our community, people like talking about what they do and what they love. And so, somebody works as an engineer, or somebody's a beekeeper or somebody's a whatever, to say, hey, would you just talk to my kids about what you do? Like, field trips don't have to be, formal, right? They can be very informal. Can we just talk to you about what you do? Can I just let my kids ask you some questions? And that's a beautiful gift to that person, right? People
it's a compliment.
It totally is.
And some of those people are still my kids' local grandparents.
Yeah, what a love.
Like that's 18 years later. So like that's like a benefit like wouldn't have even thought of.
Wouldn't it be cool if somebody had especially in a bigger city, we live really rurally, so I might not work here, but in a bigger city, if some homeschool mom kind of gathered a group of, grandmas and grandpas who had a little extra time and would like to share what they do. Sure. Right. And so, right now with COVID, we can't do anything, but, a year from now or 5 years from now or whenever we're through this thing, to have a pool of people that you could call and this is the kind of thing I do. I would love to teach some kids to knit. I would like to, take kids out to the park, or whatever. And, what a lovely gift. Wow. What a lovely gift.
And for now you can do it one-on-one rather than assembling everyone.
One-on-one, or
you can totally
Zoom, right?
Yeah, and if you really get clear about what you're feeling stressed about, like I really noticed, like crafts stressed me out. Like I need to find a way for the kids to have some crafts.
Yeah.
And the other thing that stressed me out was I didn't want to be cleaning my house. I wanted to be with the kids. So I hired someone to clean my house. And I remember talking to my husband about it and just saying, I feel honestly inadequate that I'm even thinking about hiring someone. And he's like, are you kidding me? Would you rather have one extra client every 2 weeks and have the house clean? I'm like, that'd be so much fun to just have one extra client.
Yeah.
I think the kids were, until the kids were 10 or 11, until they, actually maybe a little younger, until they needed to start to do the cleaning, all of it, not just a little bit of it. And I had to fire my house cleaner because the kids needed to do it.
We often had a house cleaner. And even as my kids got older, we have 7 kids, right? It's a big house to look after. We often had a house cleaner. And for me, justifying that was a big self-care thing. That is, okay, I just don't need to think about that. I can have people whenever I want, because I know my bathrooms are going to be clean, right? Because hospitality is a big gift of ours, right? And we love to have people over. But also in terms of just sort of saying, okay, why is this okay? I think, okay, well, I'm very efficient. I don't spend a lot of money on curriculum. If I added up, all the money I saved on not having a program, or not getting babysitters for date nights or whatever, you know, whatever it is, the things I don't spend money on. Yeah. I'm happy to put that towards somebody to come in and help with cleaning.
Yeah, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can even work a couple more hours. Like there's just, this is the creativity part. Figure out what it is you really are missing and then ask, how can I do this? And things come.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. How are we doing for questions? We're pretty much just about out of time, but is there any more questions that pop into your mind, Elizabeth, before we?
No.
Okay, so I'll just then last question, where can we find you? We'll put it in the show notes, but if you could just say it out loud, then people.
Yeah, I'm at Aligned Business Lifestyle.
Okay.
You can Facebook, Instagram. Actually, if you go to either of those pages, there's a link there that you can look at more information about the boot camp. And then of course you can message me on either of those. So it's Aligned Business Lifestyle, which of course is all about alignment that we've talked about. This is kind of
it's fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been lovely.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Access is so much. People are so gifted, right?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. And these moms who are doing this, like, I just want to encourage you that, my goodness, this is the best investment you can possibly make.
Yeah.
All of our kids' friends who didn't take the road we did, not just homeschooling, but being present.
Yeah.
From the moment the division happened till now, the layers and layers of benefit of the work, because this is a lot of work.
Yeah.
Continuous commitment to this is so worth it. So if you're feeling tired of this and you're whatever, just be encouraged. Yeah. The layers of benefit really do show up. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And we'll pop this out on Monday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.